Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of our Rimworld Ice Sheet Survival series. Last time we left off after a slightly shorter episode, still we were able to accomplish a few things. Most notably we taught both of our huskies how to haul, and the two of them also gave birth to a husky puppy. And today, before we check out the escape pod here, we start things off by naming the youngest husky, and once again I want to say thank you for all the great suggestions you left in the comments last time. In the end, the name that made the cut was in fact Biscuit, but I didn't simply choose that because it was the most popular comment. The name was once again randomly drawn, but there were actually multiple comments who suggested it, and so the chances were pretty high anyway. So Biscuit now joins his parents, Ruby and Ace, and we can have a look at the crashed escape pod, or more specifically at the person inside. Now Giggles here, unfortunately with quite a few incapabilities. She also has the bloodlust trait, and so even good animal and medicine skills, and even the too smart trait do not make her good enough to join the colony. Inside of that colony, we now start things off with a bit of trading. A bulk goods trader is just passing by in orbit, and to me that seems like a perfect opportunity to sell a few items that we no longer need. Before Cambiar can then actually use the comms console, another trade ship appears. This time it's a pirate merchant, but first come, first serve, we will start with the bulk goods trader. Alright, so I admit I briefly thought about selling Biscuit here, but we really wouldn't get a whole lot of silver for him, so I think he's worth more to us if we keep him. That means we will remain with 3 huskies for the foreseeable future, and so we're going to buy a bit of meat here. Our reserves are getting low and I don't want them to feed on the human meat. We will also sell a bit of leather that we only have low quantities of, as well as 325 units of human leather, because quite frankly we have more than enough of it. We are then also going to sell all of the dead man's clothing from the last raid. None of this stuff is worth a whole lot, but selling it will clear up some space in the storage room. Last but not least, we are then going to buy 20 units of gold, because we need those to construct a multi-analyzer, and I haven't been able to find any gold on the map yet. So this right here is the easiest way to get some, so all in all we lose a bit of money in this deal, but it's not a lot and gets us a few items that are really useful. And that's it, one trade down, let's call the pirate ship up next. Alright, so the pirates have 3 potential colonists for sale here, but we won't buy any of them. One of them is already 81 years old, the next is a nudist, which is a horrible trait for the ice sheet, and the third one is not only incapable of violence but also a pessimist. Considering the price tag, that is not worth it in my opinion, and so instead we'll just sell a few old armor vests. The superior shield belt here at the bottom that actually intrigued me, but unfortunately we cannot afford it at the moment. So the trade a fairly unspectacular one here, as we only earn 17 silver. However, it seems like Randy Random has decided that we haven't done enough trading yet, as he now sends a third trader our way, just as Cambiar and the huskies are in the process of safely storing away all the goods. So here we are in the trading menu for the third straight time. This bulk goods trader, however, does not have all that much of interest. The uranium advanced helmet here is probably the only item that I would really like to have. For a price tag of almost 11,000 silver, however, I think we have to pass. So that means we can now focus on the first building project of the episode, and as promised last time, we are going to build ourselves a geothermal generator. We need 400 steel and 8 components to construct one, but, and this is crucial, it will provide us with a whole lot of uninterrupted power, a steady output that does not change with the weather, and that, in my opinion, is a very worthwhile improvement. Now as Cambiar starts building here, a solar flare unfortunately hits the ice sheet, and that means we now have to sadly wait a while until we can see the new power source in action. Very fittingly, Cambiar now takes this opportunity to have a quick snack, and honestly, who can blame him? With the construction process on hold for a while longer, Cambiar now also heads out, because the unfortunate passenger of the crashed escape pod has now passed away. And just as Cambiar makes his way over there to haul back the body, a second escape pod crashes down, and so let's once again take a look at the person inside. Now, as you might be able to guess, the decision here was an easy one. Yes, Dash right here would be a good trader and builder, but he is no use in a fight, a masochist, nervous and greedy, and that's a bit too much on the negative side to make the cut. Cambiar meanwhile has successfully hauled the first body back to the base. The solar flare is still going, but regardless, Cambiar now finishes constructing the geothermal generator. and that now adds an additional power output of 3600 watts to the colony, pushing the total output to over 8000 watts, and that is still a good chunk away from the maximum output, since both wind turbines and both solar panels are not operating at full capacity at the moment. One thing you can see here is that I removed the conduits to the right of the generator. We no longer need them to have the grid connected, and they are only an unnecessary security risk. You can also see that our 3 turrets are now directly hooked up to the generator, simply because it's the power source that is closest by. The same thing is true, by the way, for the battery, and while in theory we could now remove both the batteries and the switches, I would like to keep all of them for now, just as an emergency backup. This now also wraps up Cambiar's first day of the episode, so we rejoin him on the next morning, as he once again heads out onto the ice sheet, this time however not for a hauling trip, but for a bit of mining. The construction of the geothermal generator has pretty much depleted our steel reserves, and since we now have the gold to build a multi-analyzer, I think we can also mine the steel for it. The multi-analyzer only requires 100 steel to be built, so in theory we don't have to mine a whole lot here, but I would also like to build a few reserves. After all, we have the dog power for the hauling, and you never know what we need to build next. Now for today, Cambiar can wrap up the mining at this point, but he will not make his way back to the base just yet, because I just noticed a snow hare pass by. And even though the snow hare does not give us a whole lot of meat, it's still better than nothing, and especially now that we need to feed 3 huskies, I will not let this chance go by. Unsurprisingly, hunting down the snow hare doesn't take long with a charge rifle, and so a few moments later, Cambiar is hauling a small furry corpse back to the base. The steel can be left out here for the moment, the huskies can take care of that tomorrow. And we start this next day just as we did on the previous one, as Cambiar and the huskies return to the mining site. In the afternoon then, I decided that we had enough steel for the time being, so I now assigned Cambiar to hauling duties. And while the huskies are still busy carrying steel, Cambiar now moves on to the second human corpse of the episode. Dash here is lying dead out on the ice sheet for a while now, and I would much rather have him rest in our storage room. And with that, another fairly uneventful day has already passed by. The return of the last husky here pushes our steel reserves up to 925, which I would say is more than enough for the next few episodes. And now that we have all the necessary materials, we can start the next morning with the construction of the multi-analyzer. The multi-analyzer is a fairly simple object, at least in regards to its use. The only effect it has is a 10% increase in research speed. Before we can see that effect in action, however, we have trouble out on the ice sheet. We haven't had a raid for a while now, and this time 3 scythers attack the base. Now, we have dealt with groups like this before, so I'm not terribly scared. Still, we should be careful. For that reason, I have actually created a second emergency animal area, which I will now assign all 3 huskies to. This should keep them safe and increase their chances of survival should things go south. With Cambiar, we are now switching weapons from the charge rifle to the sniper rifle. The simple reason is the sniper rifle's range, which makes it one of the very few weapons in the game able to outrange a scyther's charge lance. And that range is exactly what we'll hopefully be able to use to our advantage now, as we send Cambiar out, waiting for the attackers to arrive. Alright, here they are, close enough, Cambiar takes the shot, and that's a hit, wonderful. Now though, the scythers have also closed the distance, and since we don't want to get shot here, let's send Cambiar back into the base. The scythers will now pursue, but I'm fairly confident that our traps will be able to handle them. Alright, here are the first 2. The third one is hanging back a bit. The sniper shot has actually slightly decreased its mobility, but the first 2 rush into our traps with full speed, and as expected, they are stopped fairly quickly. The already injured scyther number 3 then also goes down after only 2 traps, and even better, he remains downed but not dead. That means we can now remove another scyther blade, unfortunately only 1 this time, the other one probably got destroyed earlier. Still, with the blade's market value of 2000 silver, we have nothing to complain about here, and all in all I would say we handled this raid about as well as one could expect. With the scyther blade successfully removed, Cambiar and the Huskies are now hauling the remains of the raid back to the base. Afterwards, Cambiar then rearms the deadfall traps, and soon after, it almost looks like nothing ever happened. Now you remember, before the raid we successfully constructed the multi-analyzer, and so our research speed is now slightly increased, which means now is a good time to start a new project. And let's actually continue towards the goal of escaping the planet. We are researching shipbuilding basics next. That in itself does not allow us to build a ship just yet, but it opens up the path for the last few all-important research projects. Research is then all Cambiar does for the rest of the day, and the same thing is true for the first few hours of the next one. However, we are slowly but steadily progressing towards winter. That means temperatures out on the ice sheet once again begin to fall, and that could actually cause a problem for the Huskies. Their minimum comfortable temperature is only minus 50 degrees, and as you can see already, we will have temperatures that are colder than that. For that reason, we are now going to reinstall the heater in the Husky stables, and we will set the target temperature to a comfortable minus 45 degrees. This should keep the Huskies warm throughout the next few days and give them a safe, warm space to retreat to. Speaking of the Huskies, we are now also going to butcher a bit. The snowhare corpse here will produce some meat for the dogs, while the human corpses result in meat for Cambiar. On the left side you can see, however, that our meat reserves for the Huskies are getting quite low, so we might have to feed them human meat for a short period of time, until we can either hunt something big or get more meat in a trade. Cambiar then once again spends the rest of this day with research, but we cannot yet skip straight ahead to the next morning, because at night we are surprised with another great message. Our female husky Ruby is pregnant once again. Now admittedly this could get interesting. We are already struggling with the food supply for 3 huskies, and I would say more than that could get pretty hard to handle. So we might actually opt for the trade in this case, or dare I say it, the butchering option. Of course, a lot can happen in the meantime. I just want you to know that at this point I'm not necessarily thinking about running around with 4 or even more huskies. Now the following day progresses fairly uneventful with Cambiar at the research bench. However, I have given the huskies a small hauling job. I have slightly increased the dumping stockpile for the stone chunks in front of the base, where the huskies can now carry a few additional stone chunks. Apart from that, however, not a lot happens on the second to last day of autumn, and so at night we can see everyone resting up and the research project already almost halfway finished. Throughout the next day, then no big changes. Cambiar is still busy with his research, the huskies have already finished up their small hauling job, and the 3 of them are slowly but steadily chewing through their food supply. And especially with a pregnant husky, that is no joke, as underfeeding pregnant animals can actually result in miscarriages. That is of course something we want to avoid, but luckily we have a few human meat reserves on hand. In the evening then we have a breakdown of the comms console. Not a huge problem, but one that we should fix right away. You never know when a trader happens to pass by, and especially now that we could use a bit more meat, we don't want to miss one. Luckily though, we have more than a few components lying around, and so Cambiar can quickly fix the issue without much trouble. After a good night's rest, the mission Feed the Huskies then enters its first stage, with the Huskies grabbing themselves some insect jelly. Insect jelly can be eaten by pretty much anyone in this game. Its nice taste makes it especially suited for humans, of course, but the Huskies will enjoy it just as much, and with Cambiar still feeding his cannibal appetite, there is no need at this point to save anything for him. Cambiar himself, meanwhile, remains steadfast in front of the research bench, and even a peace talks opportunity in the evening will not change anything about that. The faction offering peace here is one of the tribes out on the ice sheet, and for that reason I'm not terribly interested in making peace just yet. Their raids are often fairly squishy and happen in large numbers. In short, they are the perfect meat supply. Speaking of meat supply, a few hours later then, the colony is once again reached by a call for help. We know the drill already. A refugee is chased by pirates, and we now have to decide whether or not we're willing to help and fend off the attackers. And since we are running low on meat, I would say let's risk it. After all, we can always let the attackers recapture the refugee, and in most cases they should then leave without a fight. So here's Snotface, at least for the time being, the newest member of the colony, not necessarily the most skilled person on the planet, and also completely naked, so realistically I don't even see her arrive at the base anyway. And here are now the attackers. Yep, that is quite an army. This group definitely has the capabilities to breach our defenses, so the strategy will in fact be to let them recapture the refugee, and then hopefully we can pick off a few attackers as they retreat. For this purpose, we are now switching Cambiar from the sniper rifle to the assault rifle, simply because that fires a lot faster, while it still has higher range than the charge rifle. Out on the ice sheet we can then see Snotface is already being fired on, so I don't think it will take long until the pirates once again take her captive. Now the hypothermia also kicks in and that slows her movement speed down significantly, and a few moments later she's down and the pirates do what they came for. They recapture her and prepare to leave. Now I had hoped that a few of these guys would leave the map in a different direction, however it sadly seems like they have all decided to turn on their heels and head up north, and that unfortunately also means we have no chance of catching up. So we will sadly not be able to hunt anyone down here. The pirates will now leave, we will probably get a few ransom demands over the next few days, but Cambiar can safely return to bed for the time being and catch up on the few hours of sleep he missed. After waking up well rested, he then once again sits down in front of the research bench. It is now officially the first day of winter out on the ice sheet, so we should definitely keep an extra eye on the Huskies, just to make sure they don't wander off too far from the base. For the second time in this episode, then the comms console breaks down again, but just like last time, Cambiar is able to fix the problem immediately. In the afternoon then the inevitable happens. Our 3 Huskies have finally run out of food. In order to keep them alive, we now have no other choice but to allow them access to the human meat, so that is what we're doing right here. Hopefully they don't cut through our reserves too quickly. Just a few hours later then, the good news and the moment I was waiting for the majority of this episode, Cambiar finishes the shipbuilding basics research. As you can see here on the right, not all of the relevant projects are unlocked yet, so until we are able to finally build our own spaceship, it will likely take a while longer. That of course also means that Cambiar and the Huskies are not going anywhere soon, and therefore we will be ready for new adventures in the next episode. For today, let's make the cut at this point. We have once again taken a few steps forward out on the ice sheet, and even though Cambiar is still on his own, I am very happy with the overall situation at the moment. In the next episode, we will then continue through the month of winter. Until then, as always, leave a thumbs up if you liked the episode. And if you want to support the channel further and haven't subscribed already, then please feel free to do that by clicking on the small trophy icon in the middle of the screen. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.